the honors to introduce our speaker, Jackson, today.
Thank you, President Mark. Jackson Sherry. I mentioned last week that I'm friends with his dad, who's a guitar instructor, and I mentioned that he played at Ann's Kickout, I think it was last year. And I only met Jackson today. His father put something on Facebook about Jackson having written a book, and I clicked on it and I'm like, okay, I have some extra time to read a book. So I read Jackson's book. So even though I met him today, I feel like I'm acquainted with him because I read through his book. And what impressed me about it, he has a great sense of humor. On page 1, he started telling a story which I'm not going to repeat to you all. Buy his book if you want to read this story. But it's very funny. But he's gone through a number of life challenges, more than any of us should have to deal with. And the way that he responds to it is just empowering to anybody who should hear him or see him. And so he's got some papers here that have codes on it if you want to read the book. It's very short. And again, I had low expectations when I went into reading it, because if you read things by professionals and to read something by somebody who's working on it, I was really impressed with what he has to say and how he says it. So we invited him to come speak, and he accepted. So here's Jackson Sherry for us.
Picking me up, or
it's pretty sensitive, so
yeah.
I don't think I can get too close.
Okay. If everyone can hear me, that's great. I just want to start off with a quick survey. Show of hands, how many people in here have been 22 years old before? Looks like most of you. When I was 22 years old, I was a sailor aboard the USS Connecticut. It's a nuclear submarine based out of Washington. And this is what it looked like while I was there. There wasn't a whole lot of sailing going on. I still found the lifestyle of a mariner to be grueling at times. And I overcame a lot during that period of my life. I learned how to take control of my actions. I learned how to solve difficult problems. And I encountered a lot of setbacks. And as most 22-year-olds probably do, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on my life. And of course, to bolster my delusion, I spent a lot of my off time in pursuit of high mountain peaks. I've been at the summit of Mount Olympus in northwestern Washington, as well as many of the lower peaks in that range. Spent hours gripping rock faces until my fingers were raw. I've spent nights in single-digit snowy weather, and I've trekked countless miles on an empty stomach. And between my work in the Navy, climbing mountains, and my strange habits of running and cycling more miles than any sane person would, I felt like I had truly tested my resolve as a human being. I was as resilient as one could possibly be. I thought, what else could a person go through? At the beginning of 2016, I woke up in the hospital. Bright lights are shining down, doctors and nurses shuffling in and out, and I had no clue what was going on. It turns out I was in a car accident that night. Some friends and I were car camping in Big Sur, and I'd gone to sleep in the back of their van, and at some point during the night, they decided to drive drunk, unfortunately, to a new place. And along the way, they hit a tree. I broke several vertebrae in my neck, leaving me paralyzed from the chest down. And between the surgeries and the drugs, I didn't really fully understand the extent of my injuries for a few weeks. It wasn't just the inability to walk. I couldn't grasp things with my hands, couldn't use the bathroom independently, couldn't push my own wheelchair. I had to completely rebuild my life from the ground up, from learning to dress myself to learning to drive, and eventually learning to break my own limits. I completed 2 triathlons with just my arms. I gave my recovery everything I had to give, and I learned a a great deal about resilience along the way. As it turned out, the only resilient skill I brought with me from my time climbing mountains and fixing submarines was the ability to suffer and still move forward. And it was the ability to take a step in the right direction, no matter how small, that got me to where I am today. A little more than 2 years later, my fiance, Lizzie, lost her life after a brief battle with cancer. And once again, I found myself at the deep end of a pool I didn't quite know how to navigate. I could still take my tiny steps, but I had no idea which direction to move. I found that the setback from my injury was a little more straightforward. It was still monumentally difficult, but at least it had a clear path. This was completely different. Just before her diagnosis, Lizzie and I were traveling in Thailand, and Buddhism was everywhere we went. It was completely ingrained into the culture there. And once we found out she had cancer, something told me that studying Buddhist philosophy would help me with the difficult times ahead. So I started reading and learning new terms and concepts, and there were 3 that really stuck with me that completely changed my outlook on life. And those are mindfulness, impermanence, and suffering. Mindfulness is the present. It's the practice of observing the here and now with no judgment or agenda. And it is very hard. We all know the negative thoughts that creep in, and we want to follow them, searching for the end we'll never find. And it was those negative thoughts that kept me from being able to enjoy time with Lizzie during her treatments. And learning to identify and release those thoughts really allowed us to spend more quality time together, free from worry or sadness. So it's a skill that doesn't come instantly, and it requires a lot of constant cultivation. And it truly doesn't work for you unless you work for it. And impermanence is exactly what it sounds like. Nothing lasts forever. We all know that logically, right? But how often do we come face to face with that reality? Usually not until the last possible moment. Our car breaks down, we get sick, we might lose someone. These are all very sad and frustrating things, but they're bound to happen at some point. It might sound a little strange to practice this daily, but I've found that reminding myself that my health, my connection to people, my belongings, and my life are all temporary, it tends to soften the blow when unfortunate circumstances arise. And in Buddhist philosophy, suffering is constant and it is everywhere. They say that desire is the root of all suffering. It's the desire to have more, the desire to recover from a cold, really the desire to change our lives in any way different from they are right now. And being aware of the existence and prevalence of all different kinds of suffering can help us shift our mindset and allow us to coexist with suffering rather than constantly trying to avoid it. But I think the most profound thing that I've learned about resilience is that a setback doesn't just reverse you on this single line of life. It doesn't matter how hard you try, you'll never get back to exactly where you started. Instead, a setback creates this new branch of life full of new and unique opportunities. I find it helpful to know that you're still the same you, but this new version of life is possibly going to be very different from the one that you just left. And how you navigate that really depends on your ability to get creative. And I think that resilience and creativity really go hand in hand. If we look at our problems in life like creative challenges, it makes them much more gratifying to solve. And as I've studied resilience, I leaned into my creative side and I began to write. And it didn't take long for me to develop a true passion for the craft. I started with a short memoir titled 8 1/4 Rules for Resilience. And each Each chapter is a personal story about a setback I've been through and a lesson learned about resilience along the way. But once my creative fire had been lit, I quickly found out my desire to create didn't stop at writing. I started experimenting with photography, and I really fell in love with cinema. And I've been studying film for the past few years, and it's really opened my eyes to the possibilities for storytelling. And it's also opened my eyes to a big lack of representation for disabled people within the medium. Oftentimes, disabled voices are left out of film and television, and if there is a story told about someone who's disabled, they are probably played by someone without a disability. And I aim to change that with my work. Over the course of the last year, I wrote and directed a short film called Laddie, which sheds light on the disabled experience in an honest and authentic way. And I'm currently in the process of raising money so I can submit this film to festivals across the country and share a true disabled story with a really wide audience. I really think that my purpose in life is to tell stories. It can be on the page or the screen or in this room, but I definitely wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the setbacks I've endured and my exploration of resilience as an art. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, definitely put a question for people.
Thanks for being here. Can you talk a little bit about what drew you to making the film and the story and gathering the people who are working through and how did all that?
Yeah, so a friend of mine that I've met a lot of people in a lot of weird ways, so I'm not going to get into that, but she actually pushed me to go to film school here at CCMB. She's an alum from there, and she got me connected with the person who I consider my mentor in film. And I think there's a big misunderstanding in the school that you have to wait until your final project to truly make a film. And he told me, no, make a film right now. Go write it and make it and do it. And I just wanted to tell a story that's both personal to me, but fictional in a way. And I just gathered the smallest crew I could, the people I really could trust with my story. And there were two of them and one extra actor and myself. And we spent 3 days just putting our nose to the grindstone and putting it together. And it's been just an amazing experience making that. No, I did star in it. Yeah.
I thought I saw.
Oh, yeah, that's my other actor. I didn't want to put my name too many times on the title.
You mentioned that you are working on submitting your film to festivals. What does that process look like, and how much are you looking to raise?
So there's a couple of things that go into it. One is mixing the film and surround sound, which you need a kind of facility to do it. So I found a person that can do it, and they mixed a friend of mine's film. So there's that part, and then there's submitting and choosing which festivals will actually be appropriate for the film. So I've created quite the spreadsheet. It's been a little bit of a nightmare, but I'm planning to submit to around 50 festivals, both in the country and a few in Europe. And I'm looking to raise somewhere around $2,500 to cover the cost of submission fees and the surround sound mixing.
So you said there's a dearth of movies about people with disabilities, but you
have a recommendation to those of us who don't have a disability, which movies best represent, or which movie best represents the person with a disability. Would you have a recommendation?
I actually would, it's not a movie, but Breaking Bad, that's a very popular series. The lead actor's son in the show has cerebral palsy, and they actually cast somebody with cerebral palsy, and I think it does a great job of showing his disability, but not, focusing too much. He still has his own unique personality and all the problems of any human. I think they do a great job of representing that.
So we heard about your dad. He plays guitar. You play an instrument?
That is the question everybody asks, and no, I don't. It's just something I never fell into. I tried several instruments. I think I stuck with the drums for the longest, maybe 1 or 2 months. And just nothing stuck with me.
Okay, so when you talk to him next, tell him that, ask him what he did in 1965, when he won the championship for Manhattan. And ask who the second baseman was.
Oh, right.
Won a championship.
Beautiful presentation, thank you for your time, and I'm really curious, you have 8 1/4 rules, so I would love to know the story behind that.
So I'm not gonna tell you what the quarter rule is. I don't tell anyone, but essentially the 8 rules are very connected to a specific personal story, and the quarter rule is something I've just kind of noticed in general life. It's not specific to me. It's kind of something you'll probably encounter several times today, and likely never thought any further than that. That's why I made it the quarter rule.
So I read this book, I know what it is, but I'm sworn to secrecy as president of Jackson's fan club. But you can buy the book. My question for you is either within the sphere of writing or film, what do you find most challenging and most gratifying?
I think those are kind of the same thing to me. I think what I find most challenging is giving the message I want to give without it being incredibly obvious. I like to hide things in layers and layers of stories and plot, and I find it incredibly difficult to read through my work and say, wow, that's super obvious and I hate it, and then going back and figuring out a way to kind of fold it into the mix so no one notices. All questions.
You didn't want to scare
That's a pretty chill dog. I wish I had that one. Thank you, Jackson. That was great. Appreciate it. All right, so next week we got Camp Royal. Calvin Eamon's going to come out and talk to us. Looking forward to that. We've also come to that point in our day where we have a raffle. So take out your ticket. The last 4 digits are 6825. You're the winner. 6825. Otherwise, it's adjourned. Thank you.
That's right.